Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Indian business is very excited that we've got the free trade agreement in place, we've got the double contribution convention in place. Indian businesses have been very bullish on the UK.
That was India's Trade Minister Piyush Goyal speaking to Bloomberg about the trade deal signed with the UK. So, will success on the global stage spark a change in fortunes for Keir Starmer's government? Hello, you're listening to Bloomberg UK Politics. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Yuan. Keir Starmer says the deal with India has brought the UK back to the world stage. And it's not hard to see why. Given all the pressures and tough choices on the domestic front, he's keen to trumpet what he sees as a big win internationally. The deal with India is the biggest trade agreement since Brexit, and it will eventually see around 90% of tariff lines for British exports slashed, meaning that within a decade, 85% will be fully tariff-free.
Yeah, well, Starmer, of course, told Bloomberg that the deal marked a real statement of intent as to how close we want our two countries to be as we go forwards in an uncertain world. So I suppose, Ewan, the question remains, how is the UK wanting to define itself on the world stage? Starmer's clearly been making inroads and he sees it as a big winning point that the UK made the first country agreement with President Donald Trump. Plenty of others want trade agreements to open up India, of course, namely the EU. So will progress on the international stage mean economic growth for Britain as a result, and therefore something of a prize at the polls for the Labour Party?
Yeah, I think that's a really fascinating question. Well, let's start off with our London Bureau Chief, Ruth David, who spoke to India's Trade Minister. Now, Ruth, just give us a sense of the scope and significance of this trade agreement. How much will it really add to growth?
Absolutely. So they're talking about 4.8 billion pounds a year from the UK. And there was also this announcement around 6 billion in investments. So that 6 billion is a bit suspect because it was Air India orders that had already been placed. But this is definitely a huge win for UK businesses that want to expand in India. India has traditionally been one of the world's most protectionist economies. And take Scotch whisky, for instance, right? We're talking about tariffs on that coming down, being halved, but being halved to 75% from 150%. The average tariff rate in India is 12% compared to 1.5% in the UK. So these are very different percentages, and India is opening up, but it's a slower opening up. But it's also a market where growth is much stronger, where you have the demographics that are very appealing to companies across a swath of industries. So I think Starmer can justifiably say that this is a good deal. And I think India genuinely feels like they have gotten some key concessions as well in terms of Indian exports here, in terms of the national insurance contributions, which was a big win and which is something that maybe the right wing of the Labour, the Conservative Party is not in favour of. But with opposition from both sides, they managed to come to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the issue where temporary workers, Indian workers in the UK for 3 years employers wouldn't have to pay national insurance contributions, as you say. It was something that was controversial to some in the UK. In terms of what Keir Starmer has done, I mean, he has succeeded. As you say, we shouldn't diminish actually what does seem to be a success. Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, neither of those former leaders were able to sign and deliver this deal with India, the most populous country in the world. And as you say, one growing fast.
Yes, there was a joke, right? Boris Johnson said it would happen in Diwali that year, and then Rishi Sunak said it would happen in Diwali, and a lot of Diwalis came and went. But I think we shouldn't take away from the fact that Rishi Sunak's, when he was in power, there was a lot of backstage negotiations that were going on then, and when the Labour government came into power, they actually went through a lot of these briefing documents, is what we're hearing reported in the media and what we are being told. And then built on that foundation. And Reynolds went to India in 2024 when he was in the opposition. And at that time, he met the Commerce Minister. So the talks have been underway on key issues for a while. And I think the two things that may have been holding back Rishi Sunak's government was he was seen as a leader whose time was limited. So it was harder to strike a deal with him. And remember all of the controversies around immigration and visas that got linked to this deal under Suella Braverman, which really didn't help the sentiment and which didn't endear India to what was going on. But I think the Labour government made this a priority. And, both the Commerce secretaries here and in India have been talking behind the scenes for months now, and they managed to pull it off.
Perhaps not surprising, but the geopolitics didn't really come up, or the two leaders weren't keen to talk about it. But India has a pretty close relationship with Russia, doesn't it? It buys a lot of Russian oil. Is this something that you discussed with the trade minister? What did he have to say on that?
Yes, I did discuss it in the context of the trade deal that India is trying to ink before August 1st, when the tariffs that President Trump has promised come into effect. And I asked, is this something that is part of the negotiations? And he wouldn't be drawn into it. But he said this was not an issue. And he said this extra 10% that the US has said they're going to impose on BRICS nations didn't come up. I think the context around India and Russia is that, they have for decades now had close ties. And that's not something that Modi's government thinks that they are going to give up. And for so far, it's worked effectively for them because India has such a big market, which Western countries are keen to tap into. So they are ready to kind of make those, Faustian agreements maybe.
Okay. Ruth, thank you so much for being with us this morning. That is
Pleasure.
London Bureau Chief Ruth David, who was speaking to India's Trade Minister on that visit, Piyush Goyal. So thank you so much for going through the interview and the trade deal.
Well, we're joined now by Karan Bilimoria, Lord Bilimoria, Chair of the International Chamber of Commerce UK and founder of Cobra Beer and a crossbench peer. Thanks so much for joining us on the show today. Now you have business ties in both countries going back many years. What will this mean in practical terms for trade between the two nations?
I was there at Chequers yesterday when the deal was signed, and it was a celebratory moment because I've been working on this since I was president of the CBI, of the Confederation of British Industry, when the negotiations started in early 2022. And it took over 3 years to get this deal done, 14 rounds of negotiations. You've got to keep in mind that India hasn't historically done many bilateral free trade agreements. We as a country, the UK, when I was president of CBI, we rolled over 66 trade agreements that the EU had with other countries like Canada, which now the UK has. And then we had our new ones like Australia and New Zealand, very comprehensive deals. This is the most comprehensive, the biggest trade deal that the UK has done since Brexit. It's great news for British business, but let's just put it into perspective. We are the sixth largest economy in the world. India is now the fourth largest economy in the world. India is, as you've just heard, the fastest growing major economy in the world, growing at over 6% a year. And yet India is only the 11th largest trading partner of the UK. It should be one of the handful of largest trading partners. Our bilateral trade in goods and services at the moment is about £42 billion. I think as a result of this free trade agreement being signed now, that will more than double to over £80 billion within the next 5 years. Because this free trade agreement really will be a catalyst to propel trade, business and investment both ways between our two countries. For example, the tariffs that you've just heard about, 150% on Scotch whisky going down to 75% and then down to 40%. And India is the biggest Scotch whisky market in the world. Cars imported into India will charge right now 100% duty, but that's going to go down to 10% on a quota basis. So This is very good news for the Indian consumer, good news for British exports. Both countries will benefit from this deal in a big way.
In terms of how quickly that's going to actually come into effect, with your deep experience in business, which sectors do you think it's going to benefit most quickly? As you say, it is a major step forwards and surely a win for Keir Starmer.
This should have been agreed much long ago, but it was not. I mean, we had elections last year in both countries, so that delayed things as well. But you have instant wins when it comes to things like tariffs. I mean, Scotch whisky is predicted that exports will increase by £1 billion very, very quickly. With cars as well. I mean, our British cars, premium cars, are very well respected and liked in India. Jaguar Land Rover, which is actually owned by Tata's, an Indian company. And of course, we have investments the other way around. JCB in India has huge operations and they export from India around the world. But when it comes to leather goods being exported over here from India and other items, the duties have come right down and in some cases completely eliminated. But we've got to look beyond this. This free trade agreement is also about education. Foreign universities can now open up in India, and we've already got, for example, Southampton University that started building its campus just outside Delhi in India. We have other universities like Liverpool that have now decided to open up a campus in India. I was Chancellor of the University of Birmingham. We opened up a campus in Dubai, which was a huge success within 2 years. So that's another big opportunity for our education sector. I mean, our British universities are the best in the world, along with America. We've got 4 out of the top 10 in the world. America's got 4. There's 1 Singapore and 1 Swiss. So, you know, our universities are the best of the best, and that's a big opportunity for us. The twinning, I mean, the other thing is doing joint degrees, for example, in AI and data science. We launched a joint master's degree between the IIT. The IITs are the elite engineering institutions in India, the most difficult education establishments to get entry into anywhere in the world. The joint AI and data science degree with the University of Birmingham, 1.5 years, where students spend time in each country and each campus and come out with a joint degree from both institutions. That's the future going ahead, where India is not seen as an outsourcing destination. It's seen as a partner. India is now doing phenomenal research and development and innovation that Britain can partner with. And the other aspect, of course, is in today's geopolitical world is the defense and security. India and the UK are now increasingly working closer together, joint exercises with the Air Force, Navy and Army, officers being posted at each other's education institutions such as Royal College of Defence Studies here, the National Defence College in India. That defense manufacturing, where we've got enormous capability, but at the moment, India's been procuring a lot of its defense equipment from Russia, from France, from Israel. The last big British deal was the Hawk trainers when David Cameron was Prime Minister. We should be doing much more in defense.
What's it like doing business in India these days for companies looking to scope out new markets? Is it still a difficult place to do business? Because it's not traditionally been an open economy, has it?
Well, if you go back to 1991, when the Indian economy was on its knees and had 2 weeks worth of foreign exchange, and Dr. Manmohan Singh was the finance minister then, they had the bailout by the IMF, and India then started to liberalize. And that took about 10 years to kick in. And it was only from about 2002 that the liberalization really took effect and then turbocharged. And at one stage, India's growth reached almost 10% a year. Now it's well over 6% consistently. But what has happened is that entrepreneurial spirit in India that was completely suppressed by the bureaucracy, by the closed economy, the protected economy, has been unleashed over the past 2.5 decades. And you can see it, you can feel it, the number of unicorns being created in India, the tech that is happening over there. We see it over here. In the UK, we have some of the top Indian tech companies helping every aspect of British life, including the NHS, the public sector, and the private sector. Tata Consulting Services, Infosys, Wipro, they've got huge Tech Mahindra, huge operations in the UK. And that has seen India get on the global stage and not looked upon as an outsourcing destination, but a country that has true capabilities to partner with. And of course, in manufacturing, it's a priority in India. Our manufacturing in the UK, we are now the 11th largest manufacturer in the world in absolute terms. We've got excellent manufacturing in the UK. India wants to increase the size of manufacturing as a percentage of GDP. For us here, it dropped to below 10%. India wants to increase it to 25%. And you've got Apple phones now being manufactured in India in a big way. Aerospace now being manufactured in India. Automobiles, of course, in a huge way. So huge potential for both countries.
Yeah, and the government here in the UK wants to increase exports to India by nearly 60%. In the long run, bilateral trade by nearly 39%. It's about whether that free trade agreement does now deliver economic growth on both sides of that deal. Lord Bilimoria, thank you so much for being with us. Karan Bilimoria is the chair of the International Chamber of Commerce in the UK and, of course, also the founder of Cobra Beer and a crossbench peer. There's also one other element. So the FTA's been agreed, but there is still this investment deal that the trade minister who spoke to Ruth David was much more cagey about, didn't want to discuss it. But actually, there's also this hoped for bilateral investment deal. So that's the next leg of these closer ties.
Yeah, which promises some large figures. But with these investment deals, the details are often a little bit sketchy. Lots of good headlines for the government on this. But of course, these things take a long time to come through. Nobody's going to get a job tomorrow because of a free trade deal with India. So over the years to come, it should add to GDP. But whether it boosts the government's ratings in the short term, I think is a much more Tricky question.
Yeah, it is. But then, you have to do something to underpin growth, and trade is one of the big answers. We shall see what happens in the years ahead. That's it from us for today. If you like the programme, don't forget to subscribe. Give it 5 stars so that other people can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
This episode was produced by Tiwa Adebayo and our audio engineer was Andrew Gavin. I'm Yuan Potts.
And I'm Caroline Hepker. We'll be back with more next week. This is Bloomberg.